Hi friends, so the US has struck once again and has overthrown another Latin American country, Bolivia, and Evo Morales, and despite the fact that Evo Morales has been in power for quite a while now with fair elections each time. And I just want to share with you some, of course this is very sad, and we must stand with the Bolivian people and any country in Latin America or any country worldwide that is being overthrown by US empire. And you've probably seen my meme that I share every so often, which I've now updated. So we mustn't forget that Elliot Abrams, who was the point man for overthrowing Venezuela, probably had a hand in this somewhere. And I want to share Jeremy Corbyn's comment on Twitter about this. And of course Jeremy Corbyn could be the next Prime Minister of the UK if, I think if all goes well in December. That he said, to see Evo Morales, who, along with a powerful movement, has brought so much social progress forced from office by the military, is appalling. I condemn this coup against the Bolivian people and stand with them for democracy, social justice and independence. Sorry, it's a bit windy today. Somebody called Daniel, who has a blue tick, he said, Latin America is in a permanent state of resilient resistance against the US government and its allies, such as my own country and the monopolies they serve. I have no patience whatsoever for those who do not acknowledge and understand this, nor those who pretend that they do not. Mark Weisbrot, who I believe did the assessment of Venezuela and the terrible the deaths, many 40,000 plus deaths after the US economic sanctions on Venezuela. He's written, and this is still a military coup. Nobody voted for Williams Calaman, the commander of the Bolivarian armed forces. Some of the major media are already burying the fact it was he who pushed Evo out of the presidency. Bolivia no longer has an elected legitimate government. Rani Kalek says, Rani Kalek is a journalist, this is a moment where people like Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, Tulsi Gabbard and Ro Khanna need to walk the talk and show us they mean it when they say no more US meddling. No more regime change, no more destabilizing other countries like the Trump admin is doing in Bolivia. And something to consider. Under leftist President Evo Morales, poverty in Bolivia was cut in half. National extreme poverty declined from 37.7% in 2007 to 17.3% in 2014. Rural extreme poverty from 63.9% to 36.1%. Urban unemployment fell from 8.5% to 2.3%. Yes, it's no wonder, this is the thing. They voted for this man. He has done the right thing by them, and but because he is, some say he's socialist, but others say he's a democratic socialist or socialist democrat. I'm not sure which one it is. But he is, trying to do what he can to bring equality to his country, and the US just can't stand that. Capitalism is like a monster. It's inextricably linked with imperialism, and this is what's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen until the US empire falls, basically. They're not going to stop meddling in these Latin American countries that have socialist-like systems. They're just not going to. So Ben Norton, who's a grey zone independent journalist, he said when he found out the US has just successfully backed a right-wing military coup against Bolivia's democratically elected socialist President Evo Morales, the country's first indigenous leader who had recently won re-election by 600,000 votes. Violent coups targeted every progressive elected leader in the photo below. I can't show you that, sorry. The US-backed violent elite, rich white right-wing opposition overthrew Evo after similar US coups against Venezuela's Chavez in 2002 and Honduras' Zelaya 2009, and a failed attempt against Nicaragua's Ortega in 2018. Evo Morales won re-election in Bolivia fair and square. A statistical analysis by experts showed no evidence of irregularities. There was a coup, it's blatantly obvious. Any independent leftist, Latin American leader is targeted. And he suggests you follow him on Twitter, Ben Norton. Margaret Kimberley from the Black Agenda Report said, let's be clear about what's happening in Bolivia. The police are not joining the pro-Morales forces. When corporate media say pro-democracy, they mean the coup makers. Of course, the pro-Morales forces are the ones actually standing up for democracy. The media in this country operate as a wing of the government, and they are deliberately creating confusion. The police joining the side described as, quote, pro-democracy demonstrators, end quote, is not a good thing. So that's Margaret Kimberley from the Black Agenda Report. Ben Norton, he said, some recent US-backed right-wing coups in South America. So there's Venezuela in 2002, Haiti in 2004, Honduras in 2009, Paraguay in 2012, Brazil in 2016, Nicaragua in 2018, and that failed, Venezuela in 2019, that failed, and now Bolivia. This is in just over 20 years. There were dozens more during the Cold War. Operation Condor is back. So that's Ben Norton. This is Ben Norton's comment too. Every single democratically elected left-wing leader in Latin America fears being overthrown by the US government and the right-wing capitalist oligarchs it protects. Mexico's newly elected President AMLO has been warning against coup attempts recently as well. So the public broadcaster in Bolivia announces, quote, fascist hordes, end quote, have forced them to stop broadcasting. The US-backed military coup isn't only against Evo Morales, and it's bound to get worse. Bolivia's Garimbas demolished President Evo Morales' home. We are still trying to tally the number of homes belonging to lawmakers of the MAS, that's the party that Evo Morales belongs to, which have been burned and destroyed in recent days by terrorists of the right. This is a comment from Lula, who's just recently been released from prison, and he's been a political prisoner, and they've been trying to basically keep him out of politics. He's a former president. He said, a former Brazilian president, he said, quote, I just heard that there was a coup d'etat in Bolivia and that Comrade Evo was forced to resign. It is unfortunate that Latin America has an economic elite that does not know how to live with democracy and the social inclusion of the poorest, end quote. So that's former Brazilian president and leader of the Workers' Party, Lula da Silva. Of course, the American mainstream media, well, firstly I want to say about what Rania Khalek said about Ilhan Omar and Ro and Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. Well, I've had a look on their Twitter. Now, I realize it's probably nighttime, although this happened before they probably would have retired for the evening. There's been no comment, really, except for Ilhan Omar, and she made this sort of clueless comment as part of her comment. She sort of basically said it was wrong what happened, but then said Bolivia needs free and fair elections. See, this is what they keep saying about the Latin American countries. They have. Venezuela had free and fair elections. They had one of the most transparent elections there are, far more so than the United States. And the same has happened with Bolivia. Bolivia had a fair election. You know, this is the sort of, I don't know, it really, and it aggravates me that there's these politicians who, they can't seem to, when it comes to, because they're in the Democratic Party, they just fall in line with the sort of narrative about Latin America. It's really sort of colonialist and racist, as if only the United States has free and fair elections, and everybody knows that's bunk. The United States, there's all kinds of problems. They've got super delegates, they've got, there's no paper trail, they don't have preferential voting. There's black people being left off rolls, there's been masses of people being left off rolls, the Democratic Party steals primaries from Bernie Sanders, and they'll probably do it again, and on and on and on. The United States, there's a whole bunch of things wrong with the elections of the United States. They're electronic machines which can be remotely hacked by a 12-year-old. You know, and here they are complaining about these other countries. Basically, until, if they were capitalists, if they were overtaken by the US, any election they had from then on would be considered fair and free elections. But because they're socialist leaning or they're socialist, they will never ever say that about a socialist country. Never. The US basically just wants to take over the world, and they'll do it by any means necessary. And this is the second time they've done this to Bolivia. They did it in 1964. Let's read the US master list, overthrowing other people's governments. This is originally by William Bloom, and I've updated some. It may be an incomplete list, but just have a listen. This is the country, this is the empire that claims they love democracy. The empire that has 800 plus bases worldwide. The empire that basically is threatening different countries and putting economic sanctions, which are an act of war, constantly threatening countries, and claims to love democracy. I mean, what a effing joke that is. Okay, so here, instances of the United States overthrowing or attempting to overthrow a foreign government since the Second World War. China, 1949 to early 1960s. Albania, 1949 to 53. East Germany, 1950s. Iran, 1953, that was successful. Guatemala, 1954, that was successful. Costa Rica, mid-1950s. Syria, 1956 to 57. Egypt, 1957. Indonesia, 1957 to 58. British Guiana, 1953 to 64, that was successful. Iraq, 1963, successful. North Vietnam, 1945 to 73. Cambodia, 1955 to 70, successful. Laos, 1958, successful. 1959, successful. 1960, successful. Ecuador, 1960 to 63, successful. Congo, 1960, successful. France, 1965. Brazil, 1962 to 64, successful. Dominican Republic, 1963, successful. Cuba, 1959 to present. Bolivia, 1964, successful. Ghana, 1966, successful. Chile, 1964 to 73, successful. Greece, 1967, successful. Costa Rica, 1970 to 71. Bolivia, 1971. Oh, they've tried, this will be the third time. I'm sorry, I correct myself. Bolivia, 1971, successful. Australia, my country, 1973 to 75, successful. Angola, 1975 to and 1980s. Zaire, 1975. Portugal, 1974 to 76, successful. Jamaica, 1976 to 80, successful. Seychelles, 1979 to 81. Chad, 1981 to 82, successful. Grenada, 1983, successful. South Yemen, 1982 to 84. Suriname, 1982 to 84. Fiji, 1987, successful. Libya, 1980s. Nicaragua, 1981 to 90, successful. Panama, 1989, successful. Bulgaria, 1990, successful. Albania, 1991, successful. Iraq, 1991. Afghanistan, 1980, successful. Somalia, 1993. Yugoslavia, 1999 to 2000, successful. Ecuador, 2000, successful. Afghanistan, 2001, successful. Venezuela, 2002, successful. Iraq, 2003, successful. Haiti, 2004, successful. Somalia, 2007 to present. Honduras, 2009. I think that was successful. Sorry, I don't have that asterisk there. Libya, 2011, successful. Syria, 2012, ongoing. Paraguay, 2012, successful. Ukraine, 2014, successful. Brazil, 2016, successful. Nicaragua, 2018. Venezuela, 2019. They're both unsuccessful. Iran, that's an ongoing thing. Iran, 2019. And Bolivia, successful, 2019. So that's an incomplete list. And, they're just constantly working on this. Constantly. I mean, it's just an ongoing situation. They just keep going. If they weren't successful this time with Bolivia, they just keep going and keep going, the U.S. government. And WikiLeaks released this indication, this sort of evidence that the opposition in Bolivia has been working on this with the U.S. government for many, many years. I'll show you that cable or whatever it is, that evidence. So, the U.S. has been working on this, and they were successful. And these people, by the way, these garimbas that are basically, they're very violent, and it's possible that Evo Morales, if he hasn't already fled the country, which I hope he has, they may execute him. It might be another Chile incident with Allende, that sort of thing. And sadly, unlike Venezuela, I think the working people there are armed. I'm not for violence or anything, but I mean, I think people have the right to self-defense. And in Venezuela, I think they're actually armed. This is something that the government has sort of wanted the people to be armed for this type of thing. And Bolivia, unfortunately, doesn't have the same thing. Now, this is very different to the sort of carryings on that the US go on about, oh, you need, the Second Amendment is so that we can, prepare ourselves against the government. If they were really serious about that, they would have done something a long time ago, because basically the NDAA allows the US government to assassinate its own citizens or hold them without trial indefinitely and without counsel. So that's a joke. But anyway, this is the problem now. So Bolivia is basically, there's probably going to be a lot of slaughtering of leftists in Bolivia, and possibly killing of Evo Morales and some of his people in the MAS party. Who knows? The mainstream media has been ignoring what's actually been happening and has sort of made all sorts of different. If you have a look at their the titles of their sort of reports about this incident, this coup d'état in Bolivia, you wouldn't know that it's actually a coup d'état. And you can tell then, because the mainstream media is so on board, and it's just stenographers for the national security state military-industrial complex, when they write this sort of stuff, when all, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Telegraph, the BBC, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, all these kind of Washington Post, all these kind of different mainstream media corporate-owned outlets, when they just sort of pretend like it's not a coup d'etat, that it's totally suspect, even without knowing that the US has been involved, which they have. So that's the state of things, really. Sorry, I'm sure that Ben Norton will write something about this at some point soon. He's probably writing about it now. I'll just quickly read you something from what Radio Havana, Cuba. Cuba calls for the world mobilization in defense of life and freedom of Evo Morales. Havana, November 10th. Cuba expressed a forceful condemnation of the coup d'etat in Bolivia, materialized Sunday with the resignation of Evo Morales after the brass of the armed forces asked the leader to resign. On a nationally televised address, Evo Morales announced his resignation to avoid bloodshed and the attacks against followers. President Miguel Diaz-Canel wrote on Twitter that the right wing, with a violent and cowardly coup d'etat, attacks democracy in Bolivia. Quote, "Our strong condemnation of the coup d'etat and our solidarity with brother President Evo Morales," he said. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Perella also expressed solidarity with the Bolivian leader, who he described as a protagonist and symbol of the vindication of the original peoples of our America. Quote, "We call for a worldwide mobilization for the life and freedom of Evo," said Rodriguez. In announcing his resignation, Morales said that a civic, political and police forces coup had succeeded. He said that he was resigning so that opponents Carlos Mesa and Carlos Mesa, I think that's the one that WikiLeaks says has been communicating with the United States, the national security state, etc. And Luis Camacho stopped the harassment of his followers, the burning down of the houses of governors, deputies and other elected officials, the hijacking and mistreatment of the families of his followers and the humble people of Bolivia. Quote, "It hurts to see Bolivians fighting each other, and it is a must to bring peace back to the country," end quote, he said in his resignation letter. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to share some different tweets by different independent journalists and thoughts. This is a very sad day. I'm hoping that things will turn around, because it's impossible really to crush this sort of, so as somebody said, a socialist revolution, it doesn't happen with elections. It's something that's happening within the country. And so I don't think that eventually, I think this will turn, that socialism will be triumphant again. The socialist revolution will be triumphant again in Bolivia. But this is a big setback, and it's probably going to be violent and bloody, and that's incredibly sad. And my good thoughts are with the Bolivian people and with Evo Morales, and I hope that that there can be peace again. And I hope that that whoever is the people who have undertaken this coup and whoever have organized it, that it all backfires on them one day. And I don't mean that in a violent way. I just hope that I don't know, but I just find it's such a treasonous thing to do to your country, to basically overthrow a democratically elected government and then invite, like, worse than the mafia, which is the U.S. Corporations and and the any U.S. Influence, to invite that into your country is just like inviting cancer into your country. And I just find that sort of really, really, really sad that anybody from Bolivia would do this to their own country. The same with Venezuela, like Juan Guaido and people like that. They're traitors to their country to basically invite the U.S. into their country to destroy it, basically, and turn it into a neoliberal mess, and to make impoverish people again, to make them poor and desperate. That's what ends up happening in these countries that are overtaken, where the U.S. is backed a coup. They end up desperate and poor, a lot of the people that were doing well under the socialist government or and people like Morales. That's what happens. They'll end up desperate and poor, and all their resources will be. And there's another thing too, that lithium is in Bolivia, and a great source of lithium, which is used in all sorts of things, and that's another reason why the U.S. wants to back this coup, to take over the resources. Because Bolivia, Evo Morales wanted to nationalize those resources so that it could benefit the population. And that's what happened in Venezuela. Any country that wants to use their resources to benefit the population can expect that the U.S. is going to meddle in it at some point. Look what they're doing in Syria right now. Trump actually said, we're here to basically take the oil. He actually said that. He's such a klutz and so incompetent. He actually verbalizes what they always intended to do. Anyway, that's what it's all about ultimately. Imperialism to steal resources and basically cause a managed chaos situation, impoverish the people of those countries, and basically, corporations raping and pillaging their resources and basically impoverishing everybody. It's very, very sad. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive notifications when I drop a video. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Viga. Till next time. Bye for now.